One of the things Subaru has been most famous for in its past is its horizontally opposed or boxer engines. But in the future, that's not set to continue forever, at least if this car is anything to go by. This is the Subaru Solterra, the brand's first ever fully electric car. And while we haven't been able to drive this prototype version today, we have been able to get up close with it, and we can share with you what we know so far and what you can expect when it arrives next year. This preview video will be split into chapters. See the time codes on your screen now. Before we go on, remember to read the full written content on the Solterra over on carsguide.com.au. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit those like, subscribe, and bell notification icons to stay up to date with all of our latest content. Now, Subaru hasn't told us how much the Solterra will cost yet, but based on looking at other mid-size SUV EVs in this size bracket with this much range, we wouldn't be surprised to see prices north of $70,000. That having been said, it would be lovely if Subaru could surprise us with a cost leader in this segment. Okay, design. Before we go on, we should remind you that the Solterra shares its underpinnings and a lot of its body as well with the Toyota BZ4X. Go and look that car up if you're not familiar with it. But there are some differences. We'll start around the rear here, where I think actually the Solterra looks the most similar to its Toyota relation. And down here, there's this line which cuts across here and here, which reminds me a little bit of the RAV4, but where the Solterra is quite different are these light fittings. And here they remind me more of the XV rather than the ones on the BZ4X, which remind me of the Yaris Cross. So there should be some interesting small things in the styling to watch out for. Now down the side is where the Subaru sells its tough promise over the BZ4X with these big wheel arches that are really accentuated over those 20-inch wheels on this prototype car. And as we walk down the side, they're also on the bottom of the doors here, and they work their way around the front as well. Now, around the front here is where that plastic cladding is taken to the extreme, working its way all the way down from these LED headlights into the front, where it's got this front splitter, which reminds me of the Subaru XV a little bit too. There's a blanked out grille and some contrast trims on the bonnet as well. Now, the inside of the Solterra is really quite a departure for Subaru. There are some completely different ideas, concepts, and materials in here, but there are some things which hark back to the brand's older products, like these seats here, which are actually reminiscent of cars like the Forester or XV. What's really different is this cockpit area here. This wheel is a completely different design from anything I've ever seen in any Subaru before, with all these buttons down the side and a small wheel design which should help the car feel lighter and more engaging to drive. There's also a strange digital panel here for your instruments, which sort of sits either a little bit above or a little bit below the wheel depending on the height that you're at. So that's something a little bit different. It reminds me of Peugeot's iCockpit concept, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out when I actually get to drive the car. Elsewhere, I do like this large panel here with software, which reminds me of the Toyotas that are coming through now. It's got that new suite in there, which should be quite easy to use. And there's a clean slate design for this raised panel with storage below, USB-C, and other features like a little flip open bay for your wireless charger. It's all pretty neat. Can't wait to have a drive. Now, keeping in mind that the car we're looking at today is a pre-production model, and it's even left-hand drive imported from Europe, so not everything will match what we're about to show you, but things are initially pretty good. Okay, on the practicality front, I feel like I am sitting quite high in this car, and the roof, well, it's not too close, but it's also not too far away. In terms of storage, there are dual bottle holders in the door here. That's nice and big, and there's two more in the center here, which my bottle just disappears into. There's a large storage area underneath this floating console, USB-C connectivity, as I mentioned before, and opening this center console up, there we go, reveals another storage area below. It's not too big though. Let's go hop in the back seat. Now, one of the biggest surprises so far when taking a closer look at this car is the enormous rear seat space. I'm sitting behind my own driving position there. I'm 182 centimeters tall, and I just have an absurd amount of knee room. It's quite crazy. The floor is flat as well, thanks to there being no running gear running through it. And as well, there's heated seats and USB-C, as well as adjustable air vents back here, which is really cool. Now, elsewhere, dimension-wise, I do feel like there's a lot of width in here, but headroom, it's not the best. I've seen better. And keep in mind that this demo car does have a sunroof as well, so that might change if you're able to get one without a sunroof. Now, storage, you've got 2 bottle holders in the door, just like there is in the front. That kind of dual bottle holder setup is something I haven't really seen much of before. And there's a drop-down armrest here with 2 more there, and a little slot which you could slot your phone into as well, which is kind of neat. So far, when it's been talking about the Solterra, Subaru has been banking very hard on its all-wheel drive heritage. So it's pretty safe to assume the Solterra we get in Australia will be an all-wheel drive. Overseas, it has 2 motors on either axle for a combined power output of 160 kilowatts. This does seem a little under the combined outputs of both the all-wheel drive Hyundai Ioniq 5 and EV6, but we'll reserve our judgment here until we can take a look at the full specs and, of course, have a drive. Now, we haven't been able to drive the Solterra yet, so we can't tell you much about that. What I can tell you is it will have 4 levels of regen braking adjusted with the paddles, a single pedal driving mode, and it appears the visibility will be pretty good out of the cabin. Elsewhere, you can expect the traction of the all-wheel drive system, as well as some very Subaru mud and snow driving modes this car gets overseas. Obviously, we're super keen to get behind the wheel to see how this new from-the-ground-up EV compares to its rivals, so stay tuned for our launch review. Now, when it comes to range and charging, you can expect a few things. Let's talk about range first. The Solterra in all-wheel drive form in overseas markets is said to travel about 460 kilometers on a full charge, or in front-wheel drive form will travel 530 kilometers thereabouts, but we don't know what spec we'll get in Australia, and that isn't a WLTP number, which we usually like to use to compare ranges between vehicles. Now, on the charging front, this is a European standard Type 2 charging port, and the Solterra will charge at a maximum speed of 150 kilowatts on DC or 6.6 on AC, but again, those are overseas numbers, so we'll reserve our judgment for when this car launches in Australia next year. It is worth noting that overseas, the Solterra has a 10 to 80% charge time in well under an hour from that 150 kilowatt DC charger. However, disappointingly, this 6.6 kilowatt AC charger looks a little under the standard, meaning a charge time in the region of 10 hours if you're using a public AC outlet or home wallbox solution. Now, when it comes to consumption on the Japanese testing procedure, the Solterra is said to consume 14.8 kilowatt hours to 100 kilometers on the combined testing cycle, which, if it translates across to WLTP, could mean better consumption than its key rivals. We'll have to watch this space. Overseas, the Solterra gets all the key active safety features you'd expect on a modern electric car, including auto emergency braking and active cruise. But you'll have to stay tuned for next year's launch review for the full local spec and how it scores on the ANCAP front. It will have to perform very well to keep pace with the EV pack. Again, we have very little detail here. Expect the Solterra to be covered by Subaru's 5-year and unlimited kilometer warranty, but beyond that, we don't really have details on the coverage for the high voltage battery components or what servicing might cost you for now. Stay tuned closer to the launch date as we find out. You're now up to date on what we know so far about the Subaru Solterra. It's shaping up to be a substantial offering as the brand's first electric car. But with such heated competition from rivals like Hyundai, Kia and Tesla though, as well as the incoming Nissan Ariya, it will really have to be. We can't wait to get behind the wheel.